because, quote, trust me, I know. Trust me was a term he used a lot. There was no trust. He at one point called himself, quote, the savior of Smash, end quote, on a call when he went on a rant about how great of a position he's in to do good for the community and how all of his hard work paying off to bring everyone together. Did you at any point say that you knew the Smash World Tour was going to be canceled?
Yes. And let me clarify this. Okay.
Oh boy. There he is.
Okay.
Here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Visionaries. If you're new here, this is our twice weekly live show with some of the most influential and powerful people in gaming, internet culture, new media, and basically anything that sort of younger people are into. We're an internet culture show that I co-host twice a week, produced by my company Overcome, and we thank you for being here. Today we're going to be talking with Alan Benet, the former CEO of Panda Global. I'm going to do a couple different housekeeping notes here because I know a lot of people are interested in this discussion and we appreciate it. The first part is towards the end of the discussion, a little back 15 minutes or so, we're going to take some audience questions. We are going, normally anyone can come up and ask, but given the sort of discourse that's been around this specific topic over the past month or so, we're going to only be taking questions from recognized parties that we know. I know that there are going to be a lot of people in this space that are from the Super Smash Brothers community and the esports community that we know are reputable and respectful. So if those people have audience questions, you can submit those and we'll be pinning a tweet at the top to ask those. If you're new to Twitter Spaces or you're tuned into this on desktop, the other thing you need to know is to be able to ask a question, you must be on mobile. So if you are one of our co-streamers or anybody that's watching this live on your Twitch stream, to ask a question, you are going to have to switch over from your desktop to your mobile device to be able to ask it. That's not an us problem. That's
Does this sound okay, guys? Press one.
And then lastly, I want to kind of explain a little bit about what this discussion is about. I would imagine most of the people here are familiar with what we're going to be talking about, but in the event that they are not, I think it's appreciated by our listeners to give a little bit of context. So during this conversation, we're going to be talking about Alan's involvement in the company that he was previously the CEO of, Panda, and their Panda Cup, which was a Super Smash Brothers circuit ran last year. In December, late November, early December, Alan was accused of more or less being anti-competitive against another Super Smash Brothers circuit called the Smash World Tour, which was a competing circuit. The difference between the two, for those unfamiliar, is that Alan had a license to operate his tournament from Nintendo, who are the creators of Super Smash Brothers, and the Smash World Tour did not. And after a discussion with Nintendo prior to or throughout all of 2022, which culminated the week of Thanksgiving, the Smash World Tour more or less got the impression that if they ran their finale event in December, that they would be shut down by Nintendo, who has a history of doing such. Alan was then written about and talked about by the Smash World Tournament organizers, other people in the community, and then also responded in kind in a blog post in December. Ultimately, because of all the issues, the Panda Cup was canceled. Their Panda Cup finale was canceled. And instead of having 2 circuit finale events in December, the Super Smash Brothers community had 0 circuit events in December to end up a circuit. There's plenty of context. Many smart people have commentated on this before. We had a past episode of this podcast with Aiden, Calvin, and Slime, who are extremely smart folks about this sort of thing and have ran tournaments themselves about a month ago. So if you want to find that, it is on our YouTube, which is youtube.com/overcomegg, and also on our Apple Podcast and Spotify feed as well, which you can find on the Overcome Twitter. But I wanted to welcome Alan onto the show to talk a little bit about this. He has been mostly silent since the statement that he posted about a month ago as well. And Alan, I want to start with, because this is a big part of my job. Why are you doing this interview?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I wanted to start off with that exactly too. So first off, I'm no longer CEO of Panda, as you pointed out. I'm not affiliated with Panda anymore. This is me as an individual being here. And I want to make that very clear. Okay, so as someone who formerly worked in the Smash community and in the esports industry, the reason why I'm here is that it's been over a month and I'm still receiving harassment. I really want to be able to move on I really want to take the next steps in my life. And I've been told through friends that there's still some misconceptions and misunderstandings that are out there, or some, question marks that people still have. So my hope was that by coming here and addressing some of those, or all of those, that I'd be able to move on, to be able to live my life and for this to just end.
Well, a lot of
I'm sorry. I thought I was off.
And others that have said the same. But I will say,
mods, please turn it off. Thank you.
Reading it today before we did this interview, there was certainly an aggressive emotional tone for part of that blog post, especially towards some of your competitors. People like Ken Chin, known as Hotbid, but also some of the other people involved in the boot camp as well. And I do think that kind of contributed, I think, a little bit to how people feel about what you had to say. I mean, reflecting on that, if you had to rewrite the statement, would you, and what would you say?
Look, that statement was done under extreme duress. Like, I had to flee my home, file police reports. Like, I was afraid. I was doing what friends and said was the only thing I could do. Imagine writing a statement, collecting evidence, and being told the entire time, no matter what I say, most people won't believe me. Nothing I say will matter. No amount of evidence will matter. And I hadn't said anything publicly at that point. So, and people said that I had to do something that's very atypical of me, which is if you don't say anyone's name, no one will believe you even more. It'll be even worse for you. So the thought was that by doing that it would help credibility. I'm not interested in dragging anyone. That, again, was a statement done under extreme duress. If I did it again, I don't even want to think about that situation. In a lot of it is in sort of the moment, right? In the moment of what's happening, and in response to that. I mean, sure, I can look back, hindsight 2020. If I did it today, no, I would not name certain parties. It's very, like I said, atypical of me. It doesn't make me feel good. But at the time, I was doing what I thought I had to.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily just naming parties, though, to be honest. It's the way that they are named. So there are certain parts in that statement in particular where people come up, such as, you characterize Ken Chin in a very specific way, in a way that he was aggressive, which I think a lot of people have vouched kind of the other way. We don't have recordings of your interaction with him to vouch for either side of what was said. But also things that are just like little in that statement that are little, sort of stabs at people. Like, I don't know who LD is, which obviously LD is the co-founder of BTS, one of your major competitors. I actually, at least in the case of what you were doing.
I didn't know that until he started tweeting about me. I actually wasn't aware of who he was. So I am now.
But I think that gets to a core oversight. But at least when I was reading this, and I try to be objective here, I know basically everyone that's involved in this entire situation, from the VG Bootcamp people to the Beyond the Summit people to yourself. I've known all of you for an extended period of years covering this industry. And, pardon me if this is an assumption, but I think one of the things that was done incorrectly about the Panda Cup, and part of the reason that you ultimately ended in the scenario that you did, is that you almost worked backwards rather than playing both sides of the ball. Let me explain what I mean by that. So you got a license from Nintendo, a party who, as I mentioned earlier, has a history of canceling these events and being extremely adversarial to the Smash community more broadly, and really not caring about Smash esports altogether until more recently. And you were not simultaneously, other than, I believe this is right based on your statement, other than Justin, who was one of the organizers behind the Smash World Tour, working in tangent to put together sort of this circuit as it was in conversation to be licensed. Is that right?
Or no, there were earlier conversations with other TOs and whatnot, but also Nintendo is a very private company. Leaks are not okay. So I had to keep the circle very small. But from the very beginning, there were multiple TOs, Melee and Ultimate, that were involved in structure and creating the circuit from the ground up. So there were other people, other parties involved. Not every party that one would consider a major party. Like I said, I kept the circle fairly small to prevent any leaks and whatnot from happening. Plus, look, if leaks come out and things don't happen, people get upset. It sucks. How many times like rumors had spread about potential circuits happening in Smash, and they never panned out. And that's rough. That's rough. I don't want to partake in that or be another one of those rumors in the wind that never materialized.
Your background, though, is not in tournament organizing.
Correct.
And I think like that, you all Panda, prior to the Panda Cup, etc., were an esports team. You had fielded various different amounts of rosters. You also hardware manufacturing. You put out a dock for the Nintendo Switch to play Super Smash Brothers with the GameCube controller on the go.
$2 million.
You had other hardware projects that were ultimately canceled due to some other production issues.
Right.
But this is not your background, and so what was the decision to go alone in this versus from the very start potentially creating a joint venture with someone like Beyond the Summit or one of the other parties? I feel like that would have eliminated a lot of this hostility.
Sure. Yeah. At the end of the day, they are separate businesses. Really Panda's background, we started as a team in sort of what I call phase one of the company from like 2015 to 2019. We were privately funded by myself and my co-founder, out of pocket completely. We hadn't received any investment at that point, but part of, scaling up the company and part of this partnership, we started talks about mid 2019, like it started getting serious around then with Nintendo. So we ended up getting invested in, we ended up seeking investment for the first time and getting invested in early 2020, but about January, right before the lockdown happened. And the purpose was to build out something larger to support the community, because our background was a team, yes, but we also did rankings. We did the dock. The dock itself, you have to keep in mind, it's a niche hardware product, right? We R&D'd it from the ground up as a Smash solution to a problem that only Smashers really had. It was targeted just for the community, right? So our background wasn't really just that of competition, and we also had done events, by the way, too, and we had actually run some tournaments as well. Our history, from our perspective, was that of supporting the community, infrastructure, right? The reason why I think it made a lot of sense why we were the ones to sort of get that sort of contract is that broadcasting wasn't important to us, really. That wasn't the point. Elevating broadcasts was the point, right? We actually had invested in and did a lot of things, which we can talk about later, to do that, right? And so why didn't we talk to those guys? A, like I said, I didn't really want to bring people in until things were finalized, and B, broadcasting was not the focus whatsoever. That was a secondary thing, and production actually was more important to us than the broadcast location. Our Twitch contract that we had was a 0 CPM contract. The Panda Cup streams made no money. Money and revenue is not the purpose of the Panda Cup streams. The reason for the contract was that they wouldn't play ads randomly, which they do if you don't have a contract with them. So, that's why I think it made sense for us, and why we didn't approach those
like no ad revenue.
Yeah, but you have to understand in a community this, and this is the role of Beyond the Summit that they've taken, especially over the past 2 years as COVID has made things more difficult for small businesses. You have to understand that part of, and I'm sure you do now, but maybe not at the beginning, is that in a world where, let's break Super Smash Brothers esports down to a science. Most of these tournaments started, even the big ones, started as a smaller group of people organizing locally in their region, right? This is a bootstrapped kind of from the ground up, people lugging around CRTs, everything else. This is not publisher esports where publishers are, sort of have well-established circuits or whatever it may be, well-established events, etc. You're working with so many different parties, and a lot of these people that are tournament organizing don't have sales capabilities. Some of them have broadcast capabilities, some of them do not. And so when there is a party like Beyond the Summit who is offering them the opportunity to run a lot of that for them, but also financially subsidize them, that's a huge opportunity. And I think that's part of why Beyond the Summit is so welcomed among the Smash community.
I want to
because you're dealing with people that maybe this isn't their expertise. Money's already hard enough to scrape by. So when you have somebody that's offsetting that with partnerships, et cetera, and then, that's their value add. And I think that versus you walked into a competitive community already that had something pretty well established for itself.
So I would actually say that, first of all, like you said, there's a lot of things I didn't have the knowledge of before that came in later, right? You also have to keep in mind that the people that we had hired at Panda, a lot of these people worked with all those broadcasters, all the same people. We have TOs, like you go to a tournament and you would have like talked to people there. I would be surprised if the majority of people didn't have a friend or knew somebody that worked at Panda, like personally, right? We were a company of 99% smashers, over 150, members, including contractors, freelancers. It's a big number because we had a lot of little jobs here and there too, but they were all very important to the greater, team, the greater scheme of things. So, we were assembled from the community in general. But you're talking about things as if they were established, right? Sales and partnerships, BTS doing that for events was not established until the Papa John's deal was made public. Before that time, they had done little things here and there, but there was not like a team that did sales for all these events. That was another thing that we were there for. We were there for infrastructure. We were there to help growth. We were there to just straight up help. Right, we're there to help pay costs. Like so, BTS, for example, as a broadcaster, as one of many different or one of several different broadcasters that were out there, they typically did not offer production. I believe they had the capabilities of that; they used to, but they were really just about broadcast rights and about purchasing broadcast rights from events and giving them a cut of the revenue. So the events would be hiring different production companies, and we were using the same production companies that those events were using. Really great people, that were out there. So it's a lot like, I want to say messier than you think. It wasn't like a clear solution. There wasn't a one size fits all that worked for every event. And a lot of it was scattered at the end of the day. And a lot of it was not really established. And even then, we wanted, and we believed we could help areas where people weren't doing, right? We had to grow the team in places that we, again, didn't know. The Papa John's deal was a very hush-hush thing that was not revealed until it was public. I only found out about it about a couple weeks before it did go public. So, and again, we were fine with that. It was awesome. More support for the events, the better. We were about community events. We were about the community, and we had built an entire business around supporting those events. And I mean, I could go into details about exactly how we did it. We spent years preparing for this and growing things for the sake of making Smash, helping Smash become a tier 1 esport. Because I believed, and I honestly still believe, that Smash has everything it needs, right? It has amazing storylines, it has tons of events, it has a very rich community, it has a powerful IP, it has all of the elements. And if you remove the barriers of getting into Smash competitively, and if you also bring the publisher in, because being official is very important to get to that next level, right? Then Smash could be huge. The community can grow. We can achieve something incredible together. The point of Panda, and I told this to many different TOs over the years. The point of Panda was that we didn't want 100% of the pie. We wanted 10% of a much bigger pie. The goal was to grow the pie, right? And then we all get more pie at the end of the day. That was the business strategy that I created, and this is one of my canned phrases that I would say over and over again. Is the pie thing. To the point that my team hated hearing the pie thing. So I'd say it all the time because that was our philosophy. That's what we believed. If we just grew the whole community, then we'd all benefit. And we'd all grow, and careers would be made where there weren't any. Right? A lot of people are struggling to make ends meet, and they want to put everything they have into Smash. That's their passion. That's what they love. They can't raise a family on the money they're making. They eventually have to leave. Right? There is no career. There is no long-term stability in the community, and that was something we wanted to fix. Personally, I wanted to fix. That was a big passion point of mine. That's why. I didn't take a dime out of the company because at the end of the day, I was there to make careers, make jobs. That was why I did what I did.
You mentioned that it was an important part, though, to be official Nintendo license. And there's actually a quote. I went back and watched a lot of the content around this today from Ludwig Ogren.
Order
on his mobile mail on your statement. Mm-hmm. And this is about you. He, Alan, Goes on to say that he wasn't in this for the money. He's never been paid. He didn't want the whole pie. He just wanted to create an ecosystem where people could thrive through Smash, like you just said. But here's the second part. I believe Alan. I believe that he wanted Smash to be a tier 1 esport, but he made one mistake. He bent the knee fully and completely to Nintendo. And as much as he might hype up the contributions that Nintendo helped make the Panda Cup a possibility, they've also worked twice, 3 times, 10 times as hard to hurt and shut down the competitive scene time and time again.
So,
I just want to say, I was like, I think that's the missing part of everything you just said a moment ago, is that it would be different if you were working with a publisher that had no involvement. If you're working with a Valve or whatever, right? And they were just hands off, really. They did the license thing. They helped sort of determine Counter-Strike managers. That's a totally different scenario. You're working with a publisher, though, that is, for valid reasons, given a lot of TOs a ton of hesitation with dealing with them, period, because they've shown that they're not afraid of throwing legal threats at people to make them shut down. And you just said, a lot of these tournament organizers aren't super wealthy or sophisticated or any means, so they can't fight a legal fight against a multi-billion-dollar game corporation, right? They do have to just walk away. And so I think that's the missing context there, is your partner in this sort of pursuit, for better or for worse, has a history of that.
So let me actually address that, because this is a very good point. And again, through friends, this is something that I've heard a lot over and over again, that people believe something, I think, incorrect. When we had the conversation with Nintendo in mid-2019 that really kickstarted the concept of the partnership and led to what the Panda Cup would become, Nintendo made it very clear to me that earlier that year they had decided they were going to change their relationship with the Smash community, that they were done with the status quo, right? The rollout of that change was delayed due to COVID, but Nintendo was going to come in and change things regardless of Panda.
Those times are
Panda's presence.
What do you mean by changing
I do
things,
not.
though? Do you mean shutting everything else down, or do you mean doing what you ultimately did, which is run a circuit on their back?
So I do not have the answer to that. I don't know. The only things I knew about Nintendo's change in stance to the community were things that they shared with me, which were contextual things for Panda or the Panda Cup. They didn't tell me their whole grand scheme of things, but they did publicly say some things. Like, for example, commercial events going forward will have to be licensed. That was a policy change, right? That they said that in an interview. I don't think people really picked up on that. Nintendo wasn't actually going around shutting down events left and right. They really just wanted events to protect their IP, right? And the amount of times they actually shut things down, quote unquote, is what, 3-4 times in Smash's history. And don't get me wrong, those actions happened, right? But Panda and me had nothing to do with Nintendo coming in, and people think that we did. In reality, the Panda Cup was designed, well, there's a couple of different designs, a couple of different reasons for it, right? Number one was we wanted to be a conduit for the community. So being able to go to sponsors and not only just say, hey, do you want to sponsor this event, this event, this event, this event, but then we say, hey, here's a big finale that's going to have over $1 million poured into it. You want this is another big thing you can sponsor. And on top of that, a sponsor says to us, this actually happened, can we put Mario in our app? And because of our relationship with Nintendo, we were actually able to say yes. These are the stipulations. These are the what you have to follow, but you can, right? That has tremendous value to it. Okay, so the attention, the sponsorship income that we were getting, really was to be distributed and shared among the community events that were part of the Panda Cup. That was number one, and we did accomplish that even in year zero. Like take the Big House for example. They were in a very lucky position. They were a big event. That was sort of a few months into it. Within 5 months of launching the Panda Cup, I put this in my statement, we did $2 million in sales, and it was growing still. And all of those sales, by the way, were just for the finale. None of them actually included community events. I told the sales team to go back and add on community events to the contracts for no additional money for our point, so we could share the money. Because that was important, because I said to them, I want to show these TOs the value of the Panda Cup to them from the beginning, before we're even fully established, before we get our legs, right? So Big House, before 2022, the
tangent,
most money they made was about $12,000 from sponsorships, right? And that's, for the cost of the event, a drop in the bucket. It's great. It tremendously helps them pay costs, but that's fairly low. The Papa John sponsorship they got last year was $15,000. Panda was able to bring $40,000 of sponsorships within a few months of sales to Big House. Okay. So, and with less actual deliverables than the Papa John sponsorship was asking. So we were bringing more money with less restrictions, right? That was the number one point of the Panda Cup. But the number 2 point, which relates to what we were talking about before, was that I knew Nintendo was coming in. I did not know how Nintendo was coming in. And they were going to come into the community and make some changes. The Panda Cup was designed as a barrier between Nintendo and the community. Nintendo's microscope, their scrutiny of the community, could be done on the Panda Cup and not on community events. So tangibly, that means like events that were streamed on the Panda Cup channel. You may see there was 2 different sponsor rotations.
Word barriers.
Okay, there was an event sponsor rotation and there was a Panda Cup sponsor rotation. The reason why there was 2 separate ones was that we had different sponsor restrictions. I was able to negotiate the events having less restrictions, more freedom, in exchange for the Panda Cup having more restrictions. And that was okay with us. Like, don't get me wrong, we were fine with that, and we were totally okay with that. But the goal was that if we took on all those restrictions and we took on the burden, then Nintendo's attention would be on us, and the community events would be completely free to keep their identity and be themselves. So that was actually a big point of what the Panda Cup was doing. Now, that barrier is gone. I'm not with Panda anymore. I don't know what their plans are. I would be shocked if they try to revive the Panda Cup this year. I don't know what's going to happen without that. I don't know what Nintendo's intentions are here. But I do know, for example, every event this year that was major, as far as I know, was licensed. Genesis, Low Tide City, Riptide, Shine, all of those events this year were licensed, even though they didn't, I don't think they said that out loud, and they weren't on the Panda Cup, but they were. So this shows you the change that Nintendo's doing. So Panda bending the knee was about being able to allow the community to be free and allow the community to keep their identity in exchange for us having more restrictions and more oversight, which, again, was okay with us. I actually think it helped us make better products.
Well, I think part of the core issue here, though,
I forgot what the question was.
Sort of, this is a critique you can read from people like Bobak, who's the creator of Genesis, the Genesis event, the thing you can read from Hotbid, that you can read from Deer, who's from the Battle of BC. That, a lot of the issues surrounded, I think, with your communication to them and your role as that conduit from Nintendo to the community, and sort of some of these people long-standing figures in the community. They've ran tournaments for decades in some cases, and there is pretty much universal that you made universal allegation from a lot of those organizers that you made an overture that it was join the Panda Cup or face a painful death.
Here we
basically, go. That you were going to, that Nintendo was going to come shut you down. And if you're saying that you didn't know what Nintendo's plans were here, then if that overture was made, and I want you to talk about this, if that overture was made, that seems preemptive if you don't know what the actual plan
So let me be very, very clear. I never threatened any event that they would be shut down, ever. Okay? Anyone who felt that may have been the case, I can 120% guarantee you that was a misunderstanding. Okay? Someone gave me this metaphor, and I want to share it with you because I actually liked it a lot. When I went to the negotiation table with these TOs, I thought they would see me as a peer, one of them, right? Part of the Smash community. And instead, what they saw was at the same negotiation table that there was a loaded gun being pointed at them. Simply because...
because you're working with Nintendo,
right? The shadow of Nintendo behind us. Now, my perspective was that of one of them, right? Like, I was not there to hurt them. I was there to help them. I was an ally. But the exact same conversation, right, that you're having, the exact same words exchange, the perception can be wholly different if you see this phantom gun. To me, I didn't have that gun. I can't snap my fingers and make a multi-trillion-dollar company jump and do what I tell them to. It's not possible. But they thought I could. And I didn't know that in the beginning, right? I didn't understand that. That's my fault. And I take full responsibility and ownership of that. I didn't realize that was their perspective for a while. And I talked about that in my statement. The first couple of weeks, right? There was a lot of misunderstandings and, people were a bit confused and things were moving fast. That was why. That perception difference between the two of us. I made a lot of changes when I heard, unfortunately, through other people, not directly from the TOs, I made a lot of changes to try to make sure that there was no misunderstandings, that they couldn't think that they would get shut down if they don't work with us. I shared evidence in my statement of people who didn't work with us last year, messages I sent them saying, I hope you have a great event this year. And please let me know what we can do next year to improve our offering and help support your continued success. That was a copy paste that I did to multiple TOs because I didn't want people thinking that not working with us would mean you get shut down, which is crazy. That's not true at all. That's not the point. And then now the thing is, though, I understand. I get it. I get their perspective. But what am I supposed to do? If they weren't comfortable talking to me, I couldn't correct that perspective. So I couldn't explain them that no, that was never the intention, that must be a misunderstanding. Because why would I threaten events? It doesn't make sense to me to do so, right? And I don't have the insight into what Nintendo was planning on doing. I do know that they wanted commercial events licensed. I don't know what's going to happen to events that aren't licensed. I have no insight into that. None. Didn't then. And I haven't talked to Nintendo since the day before I stepped down.
I think you do know what happened.
Yeah, less now. Okay, that's really the case. And the changes that we made. So I started making these long decks that had every little detail. I made I think it was like a 12-page or something, a document that really went into details about like every little thing because of these misunderstandings. So I didn't want them to think anything like what you're saying. And then even starting about September, every talk I had with a community member, there was always 3 pandas, specifically because I wanted people there to corroborate anything that was said, to correct me if I said anything that could sound wrong, and to also have someone else there. If they didn't feel comfortable reaching out to me, they could reach out to any of the other people that were in the call. That was the point. So I was trying to take accountability and responsibility for the idea that words of mine were being misunderstood.
I wish that call was
because
recorded.
They were, and these were words I used, and again, I take responsibility for that. But I didn't know what else I could have done. I tried my best to correct those misunderstandings, but yeah.
So I want to specifically call out one of the things that was said and get your response to it, which was from Bobak, specifically the creator of Genesis, which was one thing for sure that was constantly reiterated in our calls between him and yourself and your team, was that the Smash World Tour would be canceled, that the Smash World Tour was blacklisted, that Gimmer, the creator of one of the creators of the Smash World Tour and VG Bootcamp, was blacklisted, and it was only a matter of time before they were shut down because, quote, "Trust me, I know." Trust me was a term he used a lot. There was no trust. He at one point called himself, quote, "the savior of Smash," end quote, on a call when he went on a rant about how great of a position he's in to do good for the community and how all of his hard work paying off to bring everyone together. Did you at any point say that you knew the Smash World Tour was going to be canceled?
Yes. And let me clarify this. Okay.
Oh boy.
So first of all, they every TO in the beginning would ask me, the Panda Cup's happening, right? What does that mean for Smash World Tour?
He admitted it.
I was then put into a position. Do I be honest with them, tell them what I know, or do I hide it from them?
And what did you know, to be clear?
So I knew for a very long time that Nintendo was not fond of the Smash World Tour and what they were doing. They came up in conversations before in the past Nintendo, and the words cease and desist were used multiple times. I was under the full impression that the Smash World Tour was going to be the target for one of Nintendo's few times that they were going to, stop something from happening in the community. And they asked me. So like I said, I could have hid that, I knew, but I wanted them to trust me. exactly as he's saying. I wanted them to trust me, so I didn't want to hide anything from them. I wanted to show them that this is what I know, right? I did not take any action to shut down Smash World Tour, ever, period, at any point. Okay, in fact, I did the opposite. Every time it was mentioned by Nintendo, I said that would be a very bad idea. Please do not do that. Okay, because I know that it would harm the community. It would harm us. VGBC events were also not given licenses. And what's funny is, I had a to-do list, a sticky note, okay, on my monitor. And on the sticky note, I had a to-do list of things to do with Nintendo and talking with them and meetings with them, so we met often. And I had a reminder list that I would tell them because we had a lot of moving pieces. So I would say every 2 weeks, I would do the reminder list. And on the reminder list was, please consider licensing VGBC events. I would love to work with them someday. I reminded Nintendo and told them over and over again that we would like them to license VGBC events from our perspective, which goes to show you how much pull I actually had at Nintendo, which was not very much because it didn't happen.
Did they give you a rationale as to why they didn't do that, though?
No, they did not. And, also keep in mind that from my perspective, right, from what I was hearing from them, I did believe that the Smash World Tour would be told not to continue almost more imminent. Now, I'd only really told about 4 to 5 TOs about this, and this is all in the very beginning. And the reason was, like I said, number one, they asked me, so I wanted to be honest and transparent with them. Number two was that in the very beginning, and I put this in my statement, Nintendo was not able to issue licenses to events that were part of an unlicensed circuit. I was only able to work with licensed events, right? So that meant that I couldn't work with events that were on Smash World Tour in the beginning. That was not our design. That was not my choice, okay? And there was only one event, actually, that was within our launch window that we actually wanted that was on Smash World Tour. And they said very respectfully, and that was Gommel. They said, we already promised Smash World, we want to join Panda Cup, but we already promised Smash World Tour we'd be on their circuit, and we don't want to go back on that. And I said, okay, I totally understand, and that's fine. And they actually helped me. They actually helped talk to Nintendo, because they had direct contact with Nintendo as well, to convince them to overturn that and make that restriction not the case anymore. It took about 6 weeks. And by early mid-May, I believe, that was lifted. And as soon as that was lifted, awesome. I was happy. Gommel said, yep, we would love to join. Great. And then other TOs that asked me later on said, we're on the Panda Cup. Hey, do you mind if we join Smash World Tour? I would tell them, yeah, absolutely. Do what is best for your event. I want you to do everything you can. And I told many TOs after that was lifted, I do not consider the Smash World Tour a competitor. And this became one of my canned phrases. They're doing their thing, which is fantastic, and we're doing our thing. We're making 2 completely different products. I think the community will see that after the finals are done. The only thing I hope is that they don't take our finals date again in the future. So that was it. And after that restriction was lifted, I didn't hear a peep from Nintendo about shutting down Smash World Tour, so I assumed it was over. I assumed that thought process had been done, which I'd never seen before. Because
it feels like
for
a
years
nothing
up to that point, I'd known that Nintendo was not fond of it.
But he knew.
So I don't even know the history there. I did mention all of this in my statement as well. And Nintendo had 3 rules that they told TOs, and this is way back in the day. Things have changed since then.
3 rules.
But before Panda was even launched and established, Nintendo had direct contact with many of the TOs that are still around, and they gave them 3 rules. They said, number 1, no mods, which Nintendo's stance on mods is very open and public. Number 2, don't put Smash in the name of your event. And number 3, don't make a circuit. You did those 3, you good. Okay? We have no problem. There was a 4th unsaid rule, which was if we tell you don't do something and you do it, that's not good. Which I think, any company in the world, that would be a thing, right? So those were the rules, right? And they talked to Smash World Tour before they launched and told them, do not launch. Smash World Tour in 2020, launched, breaking 2 of the 3 rules and having been told not to do it.
They told them to not launch?
So yeah, I was not the only one that was told directly by Nintendo within the community that they were not fond of the Smash World Tour. So again, this is the context here. my hope was not to attack them or hurt them, and I made actions. I took many actions to try to help them behind the scenes because I didn't want them shut down. Again, motives, right? You have to look at motives. Why would I do that? It would hurt me for them to get shut down because I know the community. I've been in the community for 15, 16 years personally. Panda's been around for 9. The community will be very mad if Smash Bros. Was shut down. So I tried very hard and told Nintendo over and over again, please don't do that. I don't control a multi-trillion-dollar company. All I can do is advocate behind the scenes. So,
but I think the predicament that you're in,
that part I believe.
There's part of your statement that talks about sort of the timeline here. You got greenlit for the Panda Cup in March 2022, and then you were able to, then you started kind of doing more of that outreach to TOs, the ones that you had not preemptively talked to. I understand from the perspective of a tournament organizer, especially, again, because these are not major, or a lot of them are not major organizations with a lot of people, this is sometimes their side gig or whatever. They have full-time jobs outside of this. It's not something that can make them a living, even the top, for some of the biggest events. I understand that if you have groundwork laid a year ahead of time, which some of them do, being able to pivot away from something that they had already committed to, Smash World Tour, a Beyond the Summit broadcast, whatever it may be, being able to pivot away from that for your circuit, literally, within a year of any of these events, with 9 months with any of these events, is nigh impossible.
Yep.
And I think that's what was the solution then, in your opinion, to that you could offer them to make that easier? Because that's the biggest problem here is how are you supposed to recruit events within 9 months at the latest?
It was optional. Joining the Panda Cup was optional. I didn't need every event in the world to join us. I offered it to all the major events, but the ones that had pre-existing agreements that overlapped couldn't join, and that's fine. But again, once that exclusivity thing got lifted, again, not my choice, there wasn't really any conflicts. And the original design of the Panda Cup, version 1 of the Panda Cup, which I'd mentioned again in my statement, had us doing a side stream for every event. The concept was like a jump off, like we want to do an analyst desk sort of thing, add value to the events. So we actually didn't want broadcast rights, to take away broadcast rights from anyone. We just want to do a side stream, but we need permission for that. So, again, we weren't actually looking to overlap with BTS or with VGBC. We were not looking to cause any competition. Our hope was to slip into the current ecosystem and just be complementary and be value adding to the community. That was many of our goals. So, I think that's, again, I wasn't, not trying to get everyone. It was completely optional, join us or not. Totally fine. People were licensed outside the Panda Cup. And number 2, we were trying to be non-invasive as much as possible. So, plus, from year 0, we did try to make sure people made money if they joined the Panda Cup. Not everyone could make a lot of money, but money was distributed. Sometimes a very significant amount of money. I put in my statement, we spent $50,000 in one event, $90,000 on another event. They got a lot out of this. It was a very lucrative offer that we had offered them, that we'd given them. And you know what? Only a few people offered to take it in the first year. And that's fine. That was okay with us. We weren't looking to sign on everyone to the big package. There were multiple packages. We were just hoping to get our legs. That's it.
We're going to open audience questions here in a moment. So if you are one of the notable community members from the Smash community listening to this, please come up and ask your question. You can reach out to the company account, to the Overcome account, to sort that out as well. Alan, I want to ask a couple different questions, though. One about the statement itself. We covered this a little briefly. Is, for better or for worse, there was hostility towards people in your statement. And certainly in the way that I understand you explained earlier.
What do you guys want me to ask?
And you were overwhelmed and scared and anxious.
Just me, other people too. Not just me.
How do you feel about what you wrote about people like Hotbid and Gimmer and others now a month later?
I didn't feel good even a couple days after I wrote it. That doesn't make me feel good. I don't like dragging people or speaking ill of individuals. So again, I did what I thought I had to, and it was under duress. I don't have ill will towards anyone. I really don't. I really wanted to work with everyone because I still, to this day, believe that there were ways that we could work together and all achieve the same goals and be happy. There is a kumbaya moment, a rainbow at the end that we could have led to, and just didn't happen. And, I actually blame myself for a lot of it too. Like the second conversation I had, with BTS, that conversation did not go very well. In fact, a lot of people noted the PR statement. So the statement Panda made on Friday, after all that went down, I was at that point incapacitated by sort of panic attacks and whatnot. I for the first time in our history, I couldn't really do the crisis management that I normally would have been able to do. And so it was chosen to outsource it to PR companies. So the 2 PR companies, 2 legal firms, 2 corporations went through the statement that we ended up posting. The thought for that statement was that one of the PR companies said, you have to admit something. You can't say that you didn't do anything. And you have to show what accountability you took, because people don't want the truth. People don't want to hear your perspective. People want accountability. So that was the thought behind that. And that specifically was referring to that second conversation with the broadcaster, that I raised my voice in that one instance out of frustration. And that's not okay. That's not okay to me. That's not okay to the standards of professionalism I put for Panda. And that was not okay to Nintendo either, what the standards that they have for their partner. So that was a truthful part, but that was all it was referencing. And we made tons of changes on the back end. So even if people can't believe my words, I asked for them to look at my actions. After that very difficult conversation with BTS, I completely changed our business model. I reached out 4 or 5 times to them, trying to make the peace, trying to clear up any misunderstandings, apologize for those misunderstandings, because they were misunderstandings. I never threatened them and never wanted them to feel that way. But they did. And that is my fault that they felt that way, that I couldn't do a good enough job of explaining that wasn't the case, that's not my intention. So yeah, I look at this and I look at the things I posted, right? And I just think of how I screwed up, how I could have done better, what else I could have done, because that's, again, I understand the perspective. I understand that how Ken felt, right? I get that he felt threatened, even though that's not my intention. I get why these people felt this way.
Well, I think part of that, though, is because, and I saw this from a lot of other people, other tournament organizers, not just Ken, not just Bobek, not others, even smaller ones, was that you were making overtures or offering to buy these tournaments out and to purchase them in their entirety. A few people said
yeah.
that.
So, okay.
So I understand how that makes people feel.
Sure. Yeah. No, I understand that. There were about 3 or 4 TOs, I believe, last year that we had offered that to. And the concept was for 2 things. Number 1, financial stability. And number 2 was for being able to invest into the events more. So we spent a lot of money on the events, like I said. That event we spent $50K on, we made maybe $3,000 to $4,000 of merchandise sales. The $90K one, we made like $13,000, $14K of merchandise sales. We were not making a whole lot of money. That wasn't the point. Again, it was about growth in the beginning. So we wanted to be able to invest in them, so I can go to investors and say, look, it makes sense for this. So, and also, like, many events are not well to do. Many TOs put their houses on the line, right, to run their events. They don't have budgets, right? They don't know how much money they're going to have until people sign up. And then they know what they're doing. So they have to take risks. They're going to pay broadcasters a certain amount of money, So the point of the acquiring events thing was because of stability and to invest more into them. But I told the TOs in the very beginning, I do not want to acquire an event without you, the main TO, the creator, intrinsically involved with control. At the very least, I would want you creatively involved. At the very least, because we are not looking to strip the identity of the event. We're not looking to take anything from it. And let me give you the exact deal. Okay, the deal was that they would be hired as the director of the event, okay, for multiple years with minimal or no oversight from us, okay, that they would be getting a salary that was equal to or greater than any sort of profit that they made or anything they pocketed from years before. They would get a budget from the very beginning. They would get 25% of any profits they made for the event with no financial liability. They don't have to worry about things going under or things not working. They also would get a bonus if they went under budget. And
I think I know
on
what I want
top
to
of
ask
all
him.
that, one of the biggest reasons why we did it was Panda had an incredible team. Incredible team. We had really great people. And they could hire our services if they wanted to, their choice, at a discount. Video editors, graphics, TOs, we had everything that they could possibly want. And because they're part of the Panda family, we'd be able to offer that to them at a discount, right? So if they wanted it, that was the point, right? They had to be involved. They had to preserve their identity. It still had to be their event. There would be no world we wanted it without it being their event. So it wasn't about, I don't know, some monopoly that I was trying to create. It was about stability and being able to invest more into events with financial reason. So yeah, I can understand. Again, I understand. I understand people's perspectives that they felt threatened or turned off by it. I get it, but I don't know, man. I just wish they would talk to me. I wish they would bring it up with me and ask me these things or felt comfortable enough to do so.
You mentioned that team, and I want to end with two things for me before we open up audience questions. Appreciate people listening and being patient with us here. The first is that team. I've talked to a lot of people involved with Panda, and now I think that some of them I think feel very unstable now. I mean, some of them also had dangers to themselves here too throughout all of this, in terms of them having to, like you, escape your home and fear of being doxxed or anyone harming them. What do you have to say about the team that's left at Panda and kind of the pieces they're picking up? I mean, I understand you're not running the ship anymore, but you're still actively involved from an equity perspective, correct? You've not sold
really active
off your shares
passively.
of the company.
I'm working on the divestment. I mean, it's I have gotten interest. It's most certainly not the best environment to sell shares in a tech or esports company. Not only the holiday season, but with all the changes going on and the implosion of esports, I think honestly happening. It's kind of rough out there, so it'll take time, but it is going on. And being a shareholder doesn't mean I'm active at all in it. I actually don't know the full team that's left at Panda. So at the end of the day, though, first of all, the treatment of people who were proud to work at Panda, who made put part of their names and everything, was mind-boggling. It was absurd. These people care so much about the Smash community and the people that they worked so hard for to give back to help grow and create cool things for, were threatening them to the point of fearing for their lives. And that's why I was telling the PR companies in the first couple of days, I was like, I'm okay stepping down. Like immediately when the stuff went down, I'm like, if I need to step down, I will, because the team is more important to me than anything else. And the treatment they were getting was extreme. People were harassed. People who are dependent on their income were harassed to the point of having to leave. And now I don't know how they're going to make ends meet. I truly hope they can find other work, because that's insane to me. That's awful for them. So, that is it. Yeah, that's incredibly rough, honestly. But I do believe the few people that are left at Panda that I know of, I believe they're an incredible team. I don't know if Panda will be able to land on his feet. I think it's still going through a lot of things on the back end stuff. Holiday season, really, I think, pushed off a lot of things. But I think that if anyone can do it, it's a team that's left there. And I believe in them. I really do. I believe in the entire team that we had. Every single person. But the team that's left there really do care. And I think they can do it if anyone can. I don't know. The only things I really see are the same things that are public, like you and everyone else.
Two quick things. One, were you made aware that Nintendo was going to be having the conversation that they did?
No. All right.
Okay. I'm going to ask that again for emphasis, Alan, because I think we were muted during that. Were you made aware prior to the conversation that happened between the Smash World Tour and Nintendo? Were you made aware that during the week of Thanksgiving, were you made aware that that call would be happening?
15 minutes before the call happened, I was told that they would be having a discussion with them and telling them they don't want them to continue in 2023. And that the only reason they were letting me know was as an FYI in case a little bit of hate trickles onto Panda. No one really expected what happened next.
And the last point I'll make before we start taking some audience questions, because we do have a few of them, is do you feel now, reflecting a month later after your statement, a month after the scandal, that you in any way misrepresented yourself as a representative of Nintendo?
Again, that phantom loaded gun being pointed at people, that was not at all the intention, but just the shadow of Nintendo behind us made that de facto happening. But you have to also keep in mind that I was also working towards phasing myself out, because the only thing connecting any distrust people had was me. So the last time I was going to be talking to TOs was establishing for 2023 and introducing them to the other people that were in the call. Those people were going to be handling the relationship with the TOs going forward. I was already removing myself from it and being separated away because we didn't want people to feel that way. I'm not a representative of Nintendo. That wasn't the point. If anything, again, it was just that difference in perception. I also directly connected TOs to Nintendo when they asked. I showed proof of that, evidence. When they asked me, I connected them, and those TOs went on to be licensed and work with Nintendo outside of the Panda Cup, and I had no involvement in that. So there wasn't any trying to monopolize the relationship with Nintendo or licensing. Like I clearly showed that I did that, and so again, I don't know what else I could have done.
We're going to start taking our first couple of audience questions, and Alan, I appreciate your candor. The first is actually going to be from TK Breezy, so this would be the time to turn up your phone because he's going to be from the first. All right, TK, go ahead. All right, while he figures that out, while we figure out bringing him up, Zane, you were actually next. Do you want to go ahead with your question?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Hi, Zane Bonsali here. I work at BTS currently, former Panda employee. Alan, I wanted to ask, you said earlier that you had heard from Nintendo, that you had information that Smash World Tour was potentially going to be the target of one of the C&Ds that Nintendo would hand down. And so I want to know, even with what you've said about only hearing about it 15 minutes ahead of time, why you implied in your statement then that Gimmer had shut down intentionally.
Here we go.
To garner goodwill and to lash out against Panda, when it seems like you had information that seemed to show that at least there was some reason to believe that wouldn't be true, which just to me seems to send a different message than what you've been saying about goodwill and working together. So that's my question, is why you chose to imply that about Gimmer and VGBC's intentions with the shutdown when you had prior knowledge that they were a potential target for a C&D.
Okay, so, all right, I'm trying to switch mics here. So let me clarify that. After the exclusivity thing was lifted, I didn't hear anything about Smash World Tour, and I was under the impression that they would not be shut down anymore. Because I was, again, re-emphasizing over and over again to Nintendo that we didn't want them shut down. But specifically, in the statement, again, it was made under duress, and I was also trying to answer the same questions that everyone else was. I was trying to figure out, why did they get shut down? Or why did they shut down their finale? Because I was reassured personally several times by Nintendo, and they also put it in their statement twice. They told them verbally they could continue their finals in 2022. I do not know, and again, there was no cease and desist that was sent, right? And one of the targets, I was, let me also clarify, that is not one of the targets this year, something that was like one of the targets like They have only done that to a few events over the course of the years. And that was sort of one of them that thought would was that it would happen potentially. So going into that, my impression was that they were going to be fine. And I was also directly told before the call and after the call several times that they were not told they had to shut down their finals in 2022. Now, if they misunderstood something, I don't know. I was told by people about like different things, and I tried to include what I knew and come to some conclusions because people were asking me to come to conclusions, and because I was trying to figure that out myself as well. So right now, I'm saying I don't know, and it doesn't really matter to me if they chose to do it on purpose or not. At the end of the day, I do believe Nintendo that they did not tell them to shut down this year or 2022. But I also believe, them when they talked about the relationship with Nintendo leading up to that, and those different parts of things. So I don't know what the full truth is. I don't know if there's another misunderstanding there, but that's the information that I have, and this is again complete transparency and honesty.
I think our next question is, I think we got him up here now, is from TK Breezy. TK, go ahead.
Hey, okay. Yeah, that was kind of like the same thing I was really about to ask, was because it seems like you're willing to give more information now than you were able to give before. And I was like, is that like an NDA thing? Like you are now out the NDA with Nintendo because you are not the Panda CEO anymore?
Honestly, part of it, and the other part is I'm tired. I really don't want to have to be harassed anymore, and I honestly believe that telling the truth is good for the community. So again, the statement was done under extreme duress. So I did what I could, but at the end of the day, yeah. I mean, I wasn't trying to hide anything in the statement, but I was also trying to focus on what I thought was important too. And obviously now, a month later, we know the questions that are still remaining. So.
Right, but okay. So outside of that, and just to reiterate, also, I do not believe that you should have gotten either like the harassment. I kind of had hoped that like a month had passed and people would just kind of move on and everyone can shake hands, go their separate ways. It fucking sucks that that's not what's happening, but it feels as though if you had this information, that VG Bootcamp could have been shut down for Smash World Tour and stuff like that. If you knew this, and this is things that you've said, because I'm like kind of in the same boat as Zane. It almost feels like this could have been something that may have been talked about between the two of you at an earlier date that probably could have avoided all of this if you had this type of information that you were willing to give to other TOs as a point of being like, hey, it may not be the greatest idea to sign on Smash World Tour because this could happen, without actually telling Smash World Tour that this could happen.
I hear you, and hindsight's 2020. The intention was not that, but also keep in mind I was under the impression that Smash World Tour knew that they were not overly liked because of the events from 2020 and being told don't launch and then doing it anyways. I was under the impression that they were fully aware they were on thin ice. So I was not privy to the fact they had conversations with Nintendo prior to that point, and I didn't know that. So that's primarily, from my perspective, why I didn't reach out to them or talk to them about it, because I'm like, they knew already, and it's not my place to do that either. I'm not a representative of Nintendo, right? And so yeah, like, was I wrong? I don't know. I don't know if I was wrong. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Our next audience question is going to be from Dr. Piggy. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dr. Piggy. I was an organizer for the Code of Conduct that was active from 2018 to 2020. I wanted to ask, in one of your statements, you mentioned that Nintendo was not willing to give licenses due to safety concerns to certain tournaments. I wanted you to expand on that, as in what safety concerns was Nintendo caring about, and would we expect, if Nintendo were ever involved with this scene, to, see banned players, bans upheld, that sort of thing?
That gets to a level of detail that I'm fairly uncomfortable sharing, but I can say that it was about attendee safety. It was about attendee health. Security was important to them, making sure that things couldn't happen. that were untoward to the attendees, and it was all about attendee safety that they primarily focused on. But I think getting into hard details there is just that would go a little farther than I probably should.
Okay, I suppose if you could if you would say Nintendo has a safety priority, what kind of safety priorities are you willing to talk about?
Attendee safety, yes, like that no one that they had security checks, bag checks, things like that. That was pretty important to them. I again, by the way, I was not privy to full conversations with Nintendo for individual events. I had a circuit license, not an individual event license, so I don't know the full extent as well that it went. I just know the things that I've seen personally.
Well, was Nintendo? I just want to follow up on that. Was Nintendo asking you to have those same safety requirements that they were asking other tournament organizers?
We already had pretty strict safety requirements. So when they asked for our safety plans, I shared what we had, and that was it. So, I mean, I assume that we hit all their checkboxes they needed or were looking for.
Okay, that was all for my question.
The next question we're going to call up, I believe he has a couple, is from Aiden. Aiden, go ahead.
Hi. Hi, Ellen. What's going on? I just had a couple. I had two questions. I'll just say the first one. First. I was wondering when it came to the discussions with BTS that initially arose because of the issues surrounding broadcast rights. You had mentioned earlier sort of like soft confirming, not necessarily anything concrete, but the idea of like tournaments themselves being brought up, that you had like some small scale discussions with certain TOs about that possibility, not necessarily like a threat of doing so, more like cooperating with them to buy them out. And during the broadcast rights discussions with BTS, upon realizing that they already had these broadcast rights contracts, it's my understanding that these tournaments, or BTS rather, were never offered to be bought out of those contracts. And in my understanding of like broadcast rights and contracts in like other esports or in sports in general, a very like natural progression of that conversation might be to offer buyouts of those contracts so that you acquire those broadcast rights. But it seemed like the suggestions and counter offers that followed were in different directions. Like you mentioned, following up with like the example of the analyst desk, for example, and other suggestions that you attempted to reach out to later. And I was wondering why the idea or like concept of just offering to buy those contracts out was never offered.
Okay, that's a pretty easy one. They were. I actually didn't bring it up at the very first call with them. That was the only suggestion that they had given me. That was like something that they thought would be viable, was that you'd have to buy us out of the contract. That was what was said. And then the second call, I actually started with, okay, what would that look like? What would that entail? It then went on to be told to me that it would take a lot of money, months of negotiation, et cetera, and that it basically was a pretty clear it wouldn't happen. To the point that I literally put my hands up. It was a video call. Put my hands up and I was like, "Yo, dude, I was just asking because you brought it up in the last call. Like that's it." So it was actually discussed about purchasing broadcast rights, from them, and that was clearly not interesting to them. And I believe the reasoning being the Papa John's deal, which I was not obviously privy to at the time, and it took them until the end of the second conversation to mention that they'd already sold sponsorships, again, of events. So that was already discussed, and. Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's great. That's honestly great to know. That makes a lot of sense. And then the other question I had was a little different. So because this is following off of your conversation with Jacob from earlier, where you were discussing when you were communicating to TOs that the Smash World Tour was going to be shut down if they attempted to run or announced in 2022. And from your perspective, that was true, and that was the reason for like telling the truth to these TOs to like get off on the right foot, which honestly like makes a lot of sense to me. Like that that tracks. What I was wondering is in VGBC's statement, and also from having conversations with the Smash World Tour like later in the year, which tracked pretty consistently with their messaging over the course of that year, they had mentioned getting in communication with Nintendo around the same time when you were communicating that they would be shut down to TOs, that their calls with Nintendo, presumably like the same employees or team at Nintendo, were being told that that wasn't actually the case at all, and that they wanted to cooperate with them and provide them a potential opportunity in 2022. And I was wondering why there would be a disparity between your understanding of Nintendo and what they wanted for the tour, which seems in like very different, which seems like in striking opposition to the story that Nintendo themselves seem to be communicating directly to the Smash World Tour team. And I was just, is that like a timeline thing, or like wondering why that disparity existed at the time, which is like the end of 2021 when this was happening?
Yeah, frankly, I have no idea. I didn't know about those conversations until the statement came out. I didn't know any of that, what was happening. I wasn't in those calls. I can only speak to what I was told, and the information I had, to which I was, like I said, honest, and I told people what the information I had. So yeah, I have no idea why that happened the way it did. But again, I'm not. I wasn't there, so I don't know what they were exactly told.
Sure, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we probably have a ton of people with other audience questions. Sorry, folks. I only told Alan that this was going to be an hour, and we are 13 minutes over already. So we're going to end the night with a question from Hungrybox. HBox, go ahead.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Hey, Alan. So obviously the entire community is very bummed out, sad that we not only had missing out on one circuit, but not both. There was a lot of mud slung in both directions. But what I want to know is two things. The first question would be, before this whole debacle happened and the whole statements came out and Smash Bros. Tour was canceled, you and I had a call. And on that call, you were excited to tell me about the future of the Panda Cup, and you want to know, hey, are you going? Are you excited and all that? And that was good. But during that call, like, I feel like you did express to me, your honest thoughts about how valuable it actually is to have an esports team versus, just a Nintendo partnership. And corroborating with Kadoran's statement that you thought there was no value in Melee, that was hurtful for me to hear, because I know you've been in the community for a long time. I know you've been as long as that I have. So I want to know, honest and plain right now, do you actually believe in the future of Smash? And were you willing to continue having Panda as an org or not?
So, yeah, very plainly and clearly, Melee, any belief, any not belief in Melee is entirely about content. As a content creator like yourself, who is moved from Melee to Ultimate for your content, it is specifically on YouTube that I'm talking about it. It just doesn't track on YouTube. And not believing in Melee is because I've invested, quite literally, millions of dollars into different projects and different things to help support the community. And the one thing that I could not get any traction on was Melee content. I will also say that scripted Melee content, I think, with fully produced sort of Melee content, I do think that has a place, and that does track well on YouTube. It's just a lot more expensive and difficult to make. But Juan, there's probably only a handful of organizations that have put as much time, effort, and money behind Melee as Panda has, entirely at my direction. We've had 2 to 3 Melee players for years. anytime I spoke anything about disbelief of Melee, it is entirely on the YouTube content end. Melee and the future of Smash is still bright. It still can become a tier 1 esport. Again, look at the actions, right, that I took, and see how that's inconsistent with someone that would not believe in Melee. I clearly did. I clearly tried to help wherever I could. I clearly talked to everyone about different controller things, and it's different being able to sell across Melee, to sponsors and to on YouTube for content versus Melee as an esport. I very firmly believe in Melee as an esport. That's why we've had so many players. That's why we did so many things. And the conversation that we had was about a potential future where we had a content team, and it was specifically content oriented, and about being more content focused overall, where we wanted to expand and work with people that were outside of just our competitive team, and be more than just that. So the conversation was 100% entirely content focused and about content alone. So does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
More or less, but it did seem on the call that, I felt like you were more concerned about, like, I guess, the profitability of Panda rather than the team itself and the players themselves. It kind of made it seem like you weren't fully committed to the long run of having the esports org. But one other, I can.
No, that was your perception. So clearly, that I said things that made you feel that way.
Yeah.
You also keep in mind there's a lot of pressure on my shoulders to make a profitable company. I don't know if you know, but the industry has been going downhill a lot, and all investors, like, the word esports is like a bad word to a lot of investors now. It turns them off instantly when you talk to them. So
right.
I was trying to keep an organization within esports, but not lose our shirts over it. And at the end of the day, stability is important. Making a stable business is important.
Yeah.
Not going under.
So the last thing I'll say, because it's been a question that's on everyone's mind.
Yeah.
Did Nintendo shut down the controller, or the Panda controller, or was it COVID related? And I just want full honesty on that question.
Full honesty on that question, it was a mixture of things. Nintendo did want us to go through the licensing process for it, but there was COVID-related supply chain difficulties. We did not lie about that. The demand for the controller was a lot higher than anticipated. It was, I think 12,000 controllers that were bought was ordered. So between that and Nintendo's request to license it before it became a final product, we decided that it was better to do that. Now the licensing process is a difficult one and a long one, for the most part, and we have to make a very, very good product for that to happen. So that's one of the main reasons why it hasn't resurfaced. And also, we spent the last year working on improvements that we haven't revealed yet. By we haven't, I mean Panda hasn't revealed yet. But as far as I know, Panda no longer, I don't think, can continue hardware anymore. So the controller through Panda probably won't quite happen. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you, Alan.
Yep.
Well, that's going to be it for us for the night, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you tuned in the middle of the episode, we are going to have this up on audio on demand tomorrow. There will be better quality than what's on Twitter as well, given the fact that we've been simultaneously recording on PC. So that will be out tomorrow morning. You can find our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast links on the Overcome Twitter account.
Yeah,
to the space. The video portion of this interview will be up on Wednesday. On our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/overcomegg. Hope everybody has a great rest of this evening. Alan, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. And for everybody listening, we will be back on Wednesday with another interview, so stay tuned to the Overcome Twitter account. Thank you all.
Thank you all very much.
The main questions that I have were already asked by Dr. Piggy, which was the health and security concerns or safety concerns. The second question that I had was why accuse SWT of throwing their event on purpose to spite him, which he answered and said it was referring to the next year on the finals. Third question I had was in regards to whether or not he actually saw a future in Panda as an esports org rather than a content team. And I still do think that I don't know if I got like all the information I needed, but I wasn't expecting to either because those were just honest questions that I had. And I, really wanted to know why. A lot of people wanted to know for a long time what happened with the controller. I will say this. I feel like a lot of the answers were, what you're supposed to say, right? Corporate. But we did get one good thing. And here's the thing, guys. When it comes to this sort of thing, when it comes to like discussions about a person and whether their intents were pure but misguided, and everyone throws them under the bus, whether their intents were malicious and everyone's rightfully angry, or whether they had their intents and then a separate party, i.e. Nintendo, did something and then all eyes and pitchforks were on that person. I know that's like, I've had pitchforks on me too before, obviously. I know what it's like. But I also think that when you're in that position, like I just want more so answers that smashers would expect. Because I'm not even sure if he's even on a contract, with Nintendo anymore. I don't know if he's forced or required or still under NDA. But he did say one thing, which is still a big... Actually, no, he's definitely on NDA because he did say one big thing, which was he couldn't get into specifics of the safety thing because... Right, so that's probably NDA. He's probably partial on that too. So that was one big pull from this. And the other one was the fact that he knew about the Smash World Tour shutdown ahead of time. If you knew about like that, like the right when it was gonna happen exactly the time, like, wouldn't it have been a better idea to tell VG Bootcamp ahead of time before, like, making literal qualifiers around the entire Earth? VG Bootcamp knew already? That's the thing. I don't think that they knew that on Thanksgiving they were going to be like, fuck you. They wouldn't have put all that money and work into it. They knew, but Nintendo wasn't happy, but they didn't know it was going to be like, hey, y'all can't run this. But Alan only knew 15 minutes beforehand. Alan said he didn't know the timing until 15 minutes before. The timing or the fact that the tour wouldn't exist? That's what I want to know. Anyway. Look, guys, I think we all tried. Everyone who wanted to speak and step up. This is very, very difficult to pull out tidbits of information when you think like something is up. But then Alan also told other tournaments Smash World Tour would be shut down. It's just it's difficult to get information, but the right questions were asked. I wish someone from VG Bootcamp or BTS would have chimed in with a question, since they're the ones who had that conversation. But didn't imply that. Well, Zane did. Zane. I'm sorry, not just Aiden, but like legitimately LD, right? Legitimately Ken Chen. But obviously they wouldn't want to be involved in that. And I think Aiden wanted to know certain information, but I think the question was a bit too long-winded. In conclusion, this is why you should have everything written, not verbal. No, I disagree. But when you have live conversations, you're put on the spot and you have to answer things as it was. So my summary is this for the entire thing. 1, stop the fucking harassment. The threatening and shit, just stop. For him, for everyone. For every person you don't like. For Sonic players, Steve players. Jacob, thank you. Just, if you're gonna dislike, can you just fucking dislike from the walls of your own home? Can you not bring in personal safety into that shit? Can we all press 1 if we agree, at least on that, regardless of Alan being to blame or being not to blame, because there's a lot of unknowns. That is just so obvious. And I'll let it stand. If I find out anyone here participates in that towards him, I will not only ban you from this chat, I will make it a public mission of mine to make sure everyone knows that you did that. I'll use every platform I have. Number 2, isn't that harassment? No. Because you have to blacklist people. Yeah, they have to know that, because that person's a danger. If you have a guy in a theater yelling fire, that's the problem. You have to fucking, that's the problem, right? Like there's people who do things that are illegal. Yeah. But secondly, number 2, I do think Nintendo still doesn't get it. They've shown it time and time again with everything, with every cancellation they've done, with every idea of saying they're doing things to the community when really they're not, with PM getting shut down, with Evo that one time getting rid of it, with the Big House Online cancellation, with the there's too many to name, right? There's way too many to name. When there's smoke, there's fire. They wouldn't keep doing that if it simply wasn't in their culture to do it. I'm not saying every single individual who works at Nintendo is like that. There are some people who okayed the Panda Cup, and maybe they wanted it to happen in a good way. They wanted it to be the right thing. But it's very clear that the corporate environment, at least of Nintendo Japan, still doesn't understand esports and community building at a fundamental level the way so many other developers do. To this day, that I can ascertain. And if you want my opinion, I think the Smash World Tour cancellation reasonings they gave were, what's it called when it's like it's an argument style where you have something right here, it's like it's this is why we did it, but it's not really the reason they did it, but everything blames on it. Is that a red herring? I forget what it's called, but I forgot the phrase. Red herring, thank you. I do think the straw man, one of those two. I do think the healthy and safe guidelines were a red herring or a scapegoat, right? To probably an actual reason, which is, hey, we've shut down so many of these things before. We don't want a circuit while there is another circuit. You know? And a lot of it was probably PR. And I get it. PR people have to say that. They have to do that. What I forgot to ask Alan is this. And he probably wouldn't have been able to answer it at all. Because what we should be asking is Nintendo reps. Can tournaments run this year? Is Nintendo going to play keep away for a year and not deal with it because they're just going to pretend we're not there and we're going to pretend they're not there? Can we run? He probably doesn't know, or he would say he doesn't know, but it's not really his jurisdiction either. But again, number one, stop fucking going after him and the Panda team. Jesus Christ. Like, come on, fucking grow up. Stop going after them in general right now. Regardless of what you think of what happened. Just stop that shit. Like, please. Number two, I hope I live to see the day where the Nintendo corporate sphere in Japan finally understands esports. Finally understands what it is. He did do a Q&A. That's more than Nintendo would ever do. You gotta give him that. He was ready to take whatever questions. I don't know if it was, obviously more vague answers than we wanted. But last but not least, to everyone here watching in general, at the end of the day, you know who it comes down to? Us. It's always been us. Every single time we wanted to get something done in the community, to progress it, to grow it, to further ourselves back to where we were, to take ourselves out of the trenches and build our own beautiful community with potential economies of growth. That's the hardest part, is the money. Whenever we're trying to do that and we had a big ass barrier, what do? We do it ourselves. Everyone plays a role. And every single person here plays a role, actually. Every single person who watches Smash streams and makes this little number called viewership go up, 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 like that. Teams see that. Companies see that. People see that. Leaders see that. And it gives them faith in that people actually love Smash and what it stands for. Every single one of you that goes to local tournaments, it gives your TOs faith. If you subscribe to people's, YouTube or Twitch, or follow them, or interact, or add impressions in the first place, or drop subs like you do, you are part of the solution. And you always have been. I wouldn't be here without that. I think I'd be there's no way. I'd be in my sad little cubicle, wishing I could do more with the game I love. But you guys gave me a chance to do what I love. For all of us. And I don't see, especially after what happened, I don't see Nintendo giving us more of those chances. Not for a while. Not for at least a couple years. So it comes down to us. As it always will. When the pandemic hit, Fizzy sat down and literally fucking coded Online Melee with a rollback. And I sat down and I screamed at my computer for 5 hours a day, every single day, nearly for a year and a half, playing Ultimate Brackets. To your entertainment. Because that's what we had. And that's what we could do. So this year, I'll go to every major. I'll keep playing. And there's some very special announcements. Very, very special announcements from my end and Liquid's end for this year. To prove and remind everyone, it always comes down to us. And I would love to see anyone try and stop us.